Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your hosts, Sam Foote.
And Alan Armstrong.
If you're new here, we're a pair of Azure and Office 365 focused IT security professionals. Each episode, we talk about a specific topic in the space. This week is episode 16 of season 3. We're going to have a chat around Azure Firewall, a PaaS solution to help secure your network infrastructure. Hey, Alan, how's your week been?
Hey Sam, it's not been too bad. Uh, long nights, long days. How about you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. Why have you been having long nights and long days? If I if I can ask.
Well, I've been going to virtually joining the Microsoft MVP Summit. Um, so yeah, that's been interesting. Lots of information coming out that I can't talk about. Um, but yeah, it's really good so far. There's so many sessions and things like that.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. And is it are you sort of seeing sort of the community of the MVPs, right? You're getting the glimpse of like that side of things if that makes sense. Is there a lot of people attending the sessions and is it across all MVPs, not just security?
Yeah, so I've been joining a couple of sessions that are just around security and some of the other ones because they've been interesting. I was going to talk about one of them, but I can't. But yes, a lot of people are joining them from the hybrid sessions. You can see a lot of people in the rooms, things like that. There's lots of engagement, there's lots of questions. So yeah, and it's definitely it's just great from what I've seen of it so far. I've got another evening of it. Not too bad tonight, but the last two have been quite busy. So yeah.
Nice. Well, it's good that they put so much energy into the MVP community, right? It's really good to see. So, Alan, what are we talking about this week? Is your firewall?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about Azure Firewall. I think it's been out for a couple of years now, if not longer. It's been so long since I've first seen it. Um, and yeah, we're going to talk about its capability and some use cases, things like that. I think so. Yeah, I think it's a good one to do because it's been out for some time now. A new SKU was added last month, I think, for it. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so Alan's gonna drive this one. I'm gonna ping as many questions over as I possibly can. Yeah, so let's get started. So, Alan, could you just give us sort of a high level bird's eye view of what Azure Firewall is?
Yeah, I can try to do it high level. There's a lot of information to give high level. But yeah, Azure Firewall is a platform as a service firewall, cloud native, intelligent network firewall. Sits on Azure. There are three tiers: basic, standard, and premium. The basic one is the new one that came out last month, or GA'd last month, I should say. Um, And just straight from the top, I think we should talk about it. Is the SLA side of it is 4 nines, 99.99% if you use availability zones. So I think that's really good to start off with because it is like we were talking about just before we started. It is a core part of the infrastructure within Azure. If you're using firewalls and things like that, if that goes down, then you have no network. So yeah. Um, So if we talk about standard first, um, so this is built in high availability. So when you deploy it, it automatically deploys two versions of it in the background. You don't see that, and Microsoft managed the high availability side of it. And in effect, when you do that deployment, you can set your availability zone, so you can put it over 2, which then makes it 99.99. If you don't if they are on the same availability zone, it's 99.95. I guess why wouldn't you? But I guess the only reason might be that the region that you're deploying to maybe doesn't have multiple zones. That's the only thing I could think of. Otherwise, I don't see why you wouldn't at that point.
Not if it's built in and it gives you
No,
more resilience, right? Definitely.
no, you can add another node to make it across 3 regions of availability zones, but that becomes a cost at that point, I believe. Um, so from a scaling perspective, Microsoft deals with that, so it's unrestricted. So as you consume it and your more process goes through it, it then increases its size automatically. So you don't have to worry about choosing a size or anything like that. You can start small and increase, um, which is quite interesting around the pricing side of it, which we'll talk about. Um, got application, fully qualified domain name, FQDN filtering rules, network traffic, IP filtering rules. It's able to use the service tags within Azure to allow or block services, so you don't have to worry about grabbing IP lists and things like that if it's in Azure, which is great.
Yeah, that seems
Um,
very nice to be totally
yeah,
honest with you.
yeah, don't have to worry about working out what Defender endpoints all of its IPs are and things like that, because it's quite a list in itself, isn't it? FQDN tags as well. It has built-in threat intelligence from Microsoft's Cyber Center, so that's being fed into it directly, and will alert and block on demand for that. So you've got that built in, which I think is great as well. A DNS proxy. So if um, if you need to forward DNS onto maybe on premise or to another DNS service, maybe got domain controllers in Azure, you can use this to traffic to be forwarded to it, or it can act as a DNS server in effect. So this is kind of instead of having a DNS zone or a DNS zone locally, you can point to this and point to something else, but also you don't have a domain controller in the VNets that are connected to it, and you don't potentially have to deploy that DNS forwarder that Microsoft brought out, in effect, a managed as it sounds, DNS forwarder kind of thing. So you don't have to build it yourself. It's all baked into here, and I think that's quite good as well. It deploys with public IPs, and you can also do forced tunnel, so you can stop it from actually getting a public IP. There are some scenarios for that. Outbound SNAT, inbound DNAT, and again, multiple public IPs you can have, so you can NAT behind different IPs. It can hook into Azure Monitor. It has web categories, so this allows you to categorize from Microsoft database, types of data, where that URL is going to, and things like that, and block on those. You can put certificates on it. I said about the SLA and the availability zone. So there is tons of like capability there, and some of it, I'm not. Let's just put it out there. I'm not a day in day out Azure firewall or firewall engineer or anything like that. I work within the Microsoft Defender side of things, so some of this stuff will make sense to some of our listeners, but a few bits of it I don't use that often and things like that. So, but hope that piques some interest into the standard one. I mean, there's tons there. It seems like quite a lot and thing. There's no direct VPN connection, but I think that's because you would use the VPN network gateways, things like that, to manage that and then hook it up, kind of thing.
Yeah, like you say, lots of kind of like firewall appliances anyway. You know, lots of various different solutions and features, baked into firewall products, right? So that's
Mm.
why there is a big long list of them. To me, the standout thing is the the SLA over availability zones and the management of that. Because high availability and is a challenge, right? That is a challenge. If you were going to go with a um, uh, sort of a self-managed NVA solution, that is something that you'd have to think about, and a challenge that is it can be simple um, to implement, but it's something else that you've got to think about. Um, I I need to just jump back to the unrestricted cloud scalability, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what you're basically saying is that there is effectively no limit to throughput on these boxes.
I think there is a high limit to it, but it's something like 100 gigabytes per second or something going through it. I think. I have to
Okay,
double
so
check that,
so
but
what they're going to do is they're going to scale the instances for you automatically, but
Yeah.
your price isn't going to change. So I assume,
There is one part of the pricing does change, but the core side of it doesn't. The initial deployment doesn't. It's just basically you in effect you pay for the throughput, how much you're using, kind of thing. So you pay a monthly for just having it, like the
yeah.
minimum, I guess, and then you pay per X, throughput kind of thing. And
So you pay for your bandwidth through it, basically. Yeah,
yeah, in effect,
that's
the
the
compute or
variable,
processing of it. Yeah, so that's the scaling that if you
right?
start going over a certain tier, then they just scale it up. So
Okay,
um, for standard, you get 30 gigabits per second
right.
auto
Okay,
scale, and for premium, I know we haven't talked about premium yet, but premium you get 100 gigabits per second.
right. So you can go up to 30 gigabits per second. Your base. We're talking about costs now, but effectively they'll scale up to those values automatically. Because again, that is another not so much of an issue, in the cloud, I suppose, because of you know. But then again, scaling in the cloud is potential downtime as well, isn't it? Right, and risk, and so that is quite a big. I'll call it a headache to take away, right? Because you don't have to scale. You know,
Yeah,
you don't have to worry about traffic spikes. You don't have to, and all of those things. Because I assume NVAs aren't dynamically scaled as aggressively as say a web server would be. Because of how critical they are and how important they are. Right. That would be
y-
my assumption, but I don't know.
yeah. Okay, well let's talk about MVAs because we can come back to the other tiers as well in a minute.
Okay.
Um, so NVAs, network virtual appliances. How does Azure Firewall different? How is it different? Well, the first part, from my understanding of it all, is that you have to, like, in effect, build your hosts. They are virtual machines with then the networking ISO networking operating system on them. So you got your Cisco's, you got your Palo Altos, your um, FortiGates, things like that. But yeah, you have to then decide on your virtual machine size, your um, how many you have, where you put them, kind of thing. And then you have to configure the high availability. You have to test the high availability. You know, I, your SLA at that point is based on virtual machines, really. At that point,
Yeah, and then any sort of like vendor-based high availability, right? Like
yeah,
them being able to actually cluster NVAs like at the
yeah,
software level, if that
yeah,
makes
and
sense. Yeah.
and you have to patch them. There's the Azure firewall. There's no patching. It's updated as and when
Yeah,
Microsoft want to
that's a
do it.
good point. Yeah, we didn't
Yeah,
talk about that before,
no,
did we? Yeah,
well,
patching. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not. It's updated as and when. You know, yeah, when you go through patching on a firewall, I've never done it myself, but I've been in a lot of environments where they've been done. You patch one of them, you then put some traffic through it to make sure the new patch is working and all your firewall rules are working, and then you patch the other one because that's your backup. If there's a lot of like maintenance there.
yeah. And because it's like really core infrastructure, not like one service has got a bit of downtime. Because you could be flowing all sorts through this thing, right?
Mm,
Like, when we think about, like high availability and composite SLAs, you think about all the different services that could be flowing through these boxes,
yeah, well,
right?
you
It's
could
not
have your
just one
front.
service. Yeah,
Yeah, you'd have your front end on maybe one VNet, so that's all your internet exposed side, and then you might have all your database on the other side of the firewall.
yeah,
And as soon as that firewall goes down, yeah, you
yeah.
got
But you
no.
could have 20 services either side, couldn't you?
Yeah,
Talking through that, so
yeah.
how critical that is to your infrastructure is massive. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
And that's not to say that MVAs are a bad thing, because it's Azure Firewall wasn't necessarily as a recently been around. Functionality started to come in that maybe become sort of comparison. Um, we're kind of tying into some of our other sort of topics here, but kind of choosing between the two. Uh, it can be potentially quite difficult because you might have skills already in the MVA operating systems, like Palo Alto, networking engineers, firewall engineers. If you've got those skills already, then potentially why would you kind of go for something new because you got that that high level skill that knows how to fix it when it breaks and things like
Yeah,
that,
you've already
and
got
manage it.
resource for you've got resource for that capability, haven't you? Right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
yeah, absolutely. And like we sort of talked about, patching might be a thing that you want to reduce your overhead on that, depending on which way you want to go with that. Um, Azure Firewall is technically simpler to deploy. It is literally go to Azure, put your in effect ARM template, or in effect go through the GUI, deploy. With MVA, you've got to buy the SKU, bring your own license. That is going to be there is going to be a cost potential there, or at least a good close cost comparison, because you haven't got to worry about licensing things like that as
Yeah,
well,
because you've
because you
got
got to
to you've got
buy
to
the
pay two
compute.
vendors. Yeah, you've got to
Yeah,
pay Microsoft for the compute, and then you've got to pay the vendor for the software as well, right? I suppose. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, you can go pay as you go in Azure for the vendor license, but you can also get deals if you've got partnership with them
yeah,
to get discounts, things like that. Um, Azure Azure Firewall is also, I'm going to say, easily um, infrastructure able to be managed via infrastructure as code, because it is it's just in Azure, and all your firewall rules, config, things like that is all done in there. So the
yeah,
APIs are there. There's Terraform is in effect can do it straight away. Um, we kind of talked about earlier, Sam, didn't we, that technically you could probably do some infrastructure as code for the MVAs, providing the APIs or the ports are open on the firewall managers for the for the MVAs, if
yeah.
they're
I
able to
think.
do that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think for me, the real comparison here is IaaS versus PaaS, and I've kind of got two sort of open questions really on that. Is so or points, I should say. So yeah, talking about the IAC, if you've got an IaaS configuration, you've then got orchestration tools like maybe Ansible and other various different similar tools to that. Maybe also vendor owned configuration tools. It's definitely possible to do, but configuring IaaS via infrastructure as code and then orchestrating the configuration of those IaaS machines is then another level of configuration
Mm,
and also another level of skills that are required to do that. So compare that to PaaS, where it's in Azure Resource Manager and there's already a connector for it, and it's just available and you just configure it because you're configuring a lot less, right? Because it's PaaS. You give, and this is going to lead on to my next point, is you're giving up a lot of your responsibility to Microsoft. And playing devil's advocate, I sort of wonder if people, because it's such a critical part of their network, are they actually ready to give up that flexibility, configuration, and control, if that makes sense, right? Because it's such a core part of somebody's infrastructure, they've really got to trust the vendor that is
yeah,
taking that responsibility. And I'm not saying there is anything wrong with Azure Firewall whatsoever, but I could just imagine people going, so we don't have to manage anything, we just configure it. And it's like, yeah, it's like magic, right? I could just
yeah.
like imagine that conversation.
And
I don't know
and
if
you're
that's
right.
right or not.
You're right in that you got to think about that. I mean, Microsoft would have been doing networking for years, but Cisco, the Palo Altos, the FortiGates have been, have had a presence in networking and firewalling for years, and there is a lot of trust there around their products. Um, so yeah, there is going to be a bit of a trust thing. Why move to Microsoft to manage all that, and from a security perspective, how it actually blocks and things like that as well. Let alone configuration, the stability of it, and uptime, things like that. Um, One thing that is different between the two is obviously backup. You have to back up your configuration, and if you're not doing infrastructure as code, you have to back up the virtual machines because they're your appliances. So you've got there's additional cost there to keep copies of them or whatever that might be, um, as well. Back up the config within the software, because that's potentially, if you're doing Ansible or you're using their software to do it, as code, then you've got your backup in effect. But you might just have to go in there and do backups into a file share or a storage account or something. This is kind of just in the portal. It doesn't really disappear unless someone really deletes it. But you can easily grab the template, can't you? The JSON file for the configuration, or like you said, if we're doing Terraform or something, we've got that stored
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it is difficult to think about which one to go for, MVA versus Azure Firewall. I think, like we said, it's going to be down to potentially cost, trust,
Yeah.
skills,
Because I
and
also I sort of I sort of compare it kind of like deploying like web applications on Azure, right? And it's some people will want to deploy to IaaS or their own like containerized hosted systems, and other people will be completely fine with just running PaaS and just like moving on, if that makes sense, right? Maybe trading some flexibility and maybe a little bit more cost. That's arguable though. Trading some flexibility, but also offloading some responsibility to somebody else. So I think that's what it's a you know organizations that are happy to do that for their networking appliances. you know this is like a no-brainer, isn't it?
mm,
Right? If you've got that trust in your vendor, like you've got to have that trust anyway, because if you run an NVA, you've got to trust that, well, Azure works, and also the vendor of your NVA also doesn't screw anything up, if if that makes sense. So there's a lot of trust there anyway.
yeah, and yeah, of course. And if you're running applications up there, you trust the networking to the MVA as well. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly, 100%. Yeah,
um,
yeah,
yeah, the other difficulty around it is or the potential to choose between the two is functionality. I
yeah,
think there may not be some stuff that isn't available yet in Azure Firewall. I know that when it first came out, there were some things you couldn't do, but I think they've done some updates and
yeah.
feature parity sort of thing now. So
And I'm
yeah,
sure there's probably like intellectual property and features within inside of like those networking appliance
hmm
ecosystems that might keep you on there for a long, long time. If
yeah,
you've got other like Cisco products that fully integrate with your networking appliances, then that just alone might keep you on that track, might it?
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And it's not, like I said, this isn't a w- potentially one's better than the other. It's more about the situation you're in, or the environment you're in as well, where it makes sense to. If you're, I mean, kind of this kind of segues us into the other tiers. But like, if you're a small medium, SMB, small medium business, and you need to really put a file in there, you know, the basic one kind of is priced at sort of that tier. Small business trying to secure their Azure network with a firewall, but they don't want to pay for two MVA appliances in effect, and and all the complication around having the skills to be able to manage that as well in a small business. So, sort of segueing into the basic tier, in effect, you get all the functionality from the standard tier, which I think's pretty amazing. Um, just that there's a few limitations. So one of them is that the threat intelligence is alerting only, so it won't automatically block and things like that. So it will tell you that stuff's going out to a command and control and things like that. So I think that's fair enough. If you're getting a cheaper price for it, you're getting the intel, being told about it, but just not paying for the automation or the auto blocking. The other part is around the scaling. So you have in effect a fixed scale unit sort of tier. So I think it's probably like the minimum like spec that they're build in effect, and it won't auto scale up, which kind of then and you get it's in effect two hosts at that point. And in effect, Microsoft recommending around that tiering is that you'll pretty much get 250 megabits per second through it, and that's kind of your limit. So it is designed for like not necessarily huge amounts of throughput for it, small business. So and it's been priced. The price point has been lowered to sort of those restrictions, I guess, are put in place just so everyone doesn't just go for the basic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's for people that don't require that sort of like, continuous scaling up to 30 gigabit. Um, and maybe they don't particularly need like, the automation. There's a cost saving to be had if you're not at that stage yet.
Yeah. So then if we talk about the premium tier, so again, this has everything in standard, but has the additional stuff of TLS inspection. So it's SSL offload, so inspecting the actual data going through. It also has the network intrusion detection and prevention system, IDPS. So it's actually doing actual checks against what's happening in your network and preventing it. URL filtering and web categories, but I've called it advanced web categories. And the reason why I've done that is that in standard, it does it on the domain. So this could be, I use the example bbc.co.uk, right? That would be categorized as news as an example. What the advanced side of stuff of it is doing it by the full URL, so the paths. So if it was like bbc.co.uk/sports, then uh, technically it potentially could classify it as sports news. Maybe, I mean, I don't know. I've not seen the categorization. Probably not that granular for news, but maybe it's like linkedin.com, maybe /news or whatever there might be. There might be a different category on that domain. So instead of it being categorized as the worst thing it can be, you can actually allow users to that site, but maybe for parts of it. If that
Yeah,
makes
you
sense.
might not want people to be able to hit like the live section of LinkedIn or something like that, but maybe just consume the rest of it. I don't know. It's pretty like basic thing, but you might want to understand different areas of a website, I assume.
Yeah, so basically it just gets categorized by the different parts of a website rather than the whole
Yeah.
website. So, and kind of the last part is that it's PCI DSS compliant. So if you're running payments processes, the firewall is compliant. So you don't have to worry about making sure it is. It's been it's been classified as that.
So
So
that premium is then taking, because I feel like those premium features are like non-core networking features of other like firewall applications, right? Like things like intrusion protection and URL filtering, and that type of things. They're sort of like you know applications that you would layer on top of a firewall. If that makes sense, right? So it might be that in a if you're looking at an NVA, some of these extra premium features would be premium features on the NVA side as well, right? So that could
yeah,
also, if you need that functionality, it could bump up your license on the NVA side, I assume, right?
yeah, definitely, yeah, yeah, exactly that. Oh, that's what I believe anyway. Yeah,
Yeah, so all tiers you get like core firewall networking functionality, and then well, basic obviously just limits you in terms of throughput and threat intelligence, but then premium layers on extra functionality that you might want to bring in as well.
yeah, and like I said, they're always bringing new features in to standard and premium. And like I said, basic only became GA last month, I think, because people were complaining potentially that nobody, no small businesses could potentially afford the standard. But bearing in mind, I don't think any small business potentially could afford an NVA. So it's unfair to say standard is potentially expensive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think um, a best practice high availability NVA, right? When
Mm.
we're talking about, we'll call it doing things properly, so to speak, right? And then in SMB, that might not always be the case, right? Because budgets might dictate sort of everything anyway. Um, but just having that option to have, like, I don't really get how they can do 4 nines of uptime on basic. To be totally honest with you, but that's great that that SLA is there. I think that's probably the most powerful thing about basic is that you don't have to worry about that side of things, right?
No, and this is the thing about when you look at the pricing, you kind of go, okay, I've got to run it for 20, 700, I think 730 hours, isn't it? That it's based on for a month. And
Yeah,
you're
about
like,
a working month. Yeah,
times it by 12 and etc. And you're like, oh, that costs quite a bit. And you're thinking, hang on, there's two of them. So if I half that, because that's the question about when you're looking at pricing for MVAs, you go, right, okay, I need a host, I need the licensing. You go, okay, and then you compare it to Azure, and then you might think, oh, actually, in Azure, I need two of them. I need to buy, build two of them, so it's like double the price. So it's like
yeah,
seems really expensive compared to MVA, but then actually you think about it and go, oh, no, hang on, it's deploying two by default, so I haven't got to worry about that.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so we sort of talked about. Sorry, is there anything else on the SKUs, Alan, that you want to go over and talk about?
No, I think that's everything. There's loads of documentation about what they do and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. So we've sort of compared it against well, not compared it against, but just talked generally against MVAs versus a more PaaS solution with Azure Firewall. So how I suppose from my security perspective, I'm thinking of logging, and what I know about getting firewall logs into SIEM products. Um, how easy is that configuration, say, into Sentinel?
So for MVAs and physical firewalls, you tend to either have um, either their own sort of log collector, which then forwards on to a syslog or common event forwarder Ceph sort of server, and then that then gets collected by a SIEM. So with Sentinel, that would go up to using a syslog and CEF server that's been hooked up to Sentinel. Um, for Azure, Firewall, it's just diagnostic settings. You point to a log analytics, which is the Sentinel. So it's relatively trivial. If you're not using Sentinel as a SIEM, then you'd put it to an event hub and then get it collected that way.
Right.
Um, and within there is Azure Firewall application rules and the Azure Firewall network rules. So you'll see the the blocks and allows kind of thing.
And because it's like inside of Microsoft's, I'll call it network, right? I assume there's no configuration of the logs flowing from Azure Firewall into those workspaces, like you might have with an MVA. Like actually getting it into log analytics is also the challenge, right? To collect it.
Yeah, no, I think it would just run through the Microsoft backend at that
Exactly,
point
because
to
you're
the
already on the
service. Yeah,
you're right on the right side of the wall, aren't you? At that point, right?
yeah.
You're not. So there's also that to think about as well. Because if you are Sentinel connected, um, I suppose once those systems are set up, but then you're saying that in a traditional sense, you might collect those logs and then forward them on. So that would that be something like another box that you would have, or would that be like would it?
From a standard MVA, not standard, but an MVA or a physical firewall, then yeah, you'd have a syslog or syslog servers, depending on load, things like that. Then uploading into Sentinel into log analytics.
Would it be fair to say that it would be highly likely that a customer would already have a syslog servers that they could then just use, so they wouldn't have to, or if you go NVA, you would also have to bring up extra infrastructure your side as well.
You you'd have to bring up a log. I believe you'd have to bring up a syslog server close to it because you wouldn't want if you had like on-premise firewalls with a syslog server already there. Depending on where your SIEM is, of course, because if your SIEM's on premise, then you'd send it down to that one at that point.
Got it. Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
Just think, not necessarily cloud native. But you got to think about then you're paying for egress out of Azure or down to your on-premise to
Yeah,
store the
yeah.
logs. Where
Okay. Yeah.
and yeah, you would have to, for an MVA for Sentinel, you probably wouldn't have a syslog server up there. Not unless you have other appliances to feed into it up there, like if you had a Cisco ISE or other stuff that you want
Yeah.
to hook into Sentinel.
But you just said that you wouldn't have it up there. Does that mean that you would have to create one at
Yeah, you'd
that
have to have a
point?
host. You'd have to
Yeah.
build a virtual
Right.
machine,
Okay. So
a
you potentially
Linux
got an
virtual.
extra cost there
Yeah,
as a syslog server alongside MVA to add into the mix as well. Is
yeah,
that right?
and
Yeah.
yeah, and
Okay.
the ingestion of Azure Firewall and the MVA firewall logs is chargeable still. There's no it's not free or anything like that. They are still a charge there, so that's no different. It's just like you said, it's the mechanism to get it there because it's first party. It goes
Yeah,
in
it's on
effect
the
straight
right
there.
side of the fence. Yeah, wall, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, we don't talk about perimeter walls anymore, do we? Right. The network perimeter is not anyway. So yeah, we won't talk about walls. Okay. Okay. Cool. So I suppose from a feature and product perspective, I think we're pretty much there's lots to digest. You could talk about it
Yeah,
forever. But how much does it cost? As I suppose is the ultimate question because that's what a lot of this stuff comes down to.
lots of money. No, um, so like I said, it's based on the 3 tiers, and then it's split into deployment and then data processing, which is what we were talking about. So depending on how much you process through the firewall. So that's how they can pay for the auto scaling side of things. So for basic, it's in effect 32p per hour for the deployment part. And then for data processing, it's 5.3p per gigabyte processed. So yeah, it's definitely cheaper than the standard premium, we'll talk about in a minute. So
So just doing some rough calculator maths because unfortunately this pricing page doesn't do monthly. Unfortunately, um, Microsoft. If if we run basic, if we deploy basic, we're looking at 233 British pounds per month. That equates to 0.395 times 730. Oh, right, £233 a month. Right, okay. And then we're looking at what was it, 5.3 pence?
3p per gig.
So let's say if we do a terabyte. No, let's because this is basic, right? You're capped to 250 megabits per second, aren't you?
Yep. So bear in mind that first price, that's including 2 hosts. So
Yes. Yeah.
it's like 120. What was it? You said 250.
233 pounds 60. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
£113 per
Yeah.
firewall. It's not bad, I don't think.
The infrastructure and the software,
Yes,
because you're also going to have to pay for data
through it.
egress
Yes.
on an MVA in Azure as well, right? So this
Mhm.
data processing cost, I mean, the 5 pence per gigabyte sounds quite expensive. So 100, yeah, okay,
Well, 100 gig would be £5, wouldn't it?
£5, and then so it's £50 per terabyte ish.
Yeah. I don't think that's crazy. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, without
Okay,
knowing.
£50 a terabyte.
Yeah.
That doesn't. I don't know. It. I, I don't know. I suppose it really depends on your use case, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right. If you've got light usage, if you need,
You
you
might
know,
need it for compliance, that you need to have that type of firewall or a
exactly.
firewall on there.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Okay, so standard. So this is £1 and 1.6p per hour to deploy it. And that's because it's got everything and it can do up to that was it 10 gig? Let me just double
30
check.
gigabits per second.
30 gigs, yeah, 30
Yeah.
gigabits per second. Scaling. Okay,
Yeah.
plus all those features that are all fully fledged and everything. And then it's 1.3p per gigabyte, because I'm guessing you're paying more for you got a higher tier kind of thing.
Okay, because I suppose this. So just let me run this by you. You pay for your deployment. So if I go standard, I'm paying £1. Let's call it £1 per hour to make it easy. I'm
Yeah.
paying £1 per hour. If I go to 30 gigabits per second, my deployment cost is still £1 per hour, isn't it?
As
Right?
far as I'm aware, yes. And then it's the processing that increases because you're processing
Yes,
the data.
because that is directly the amount of data that you process is the throughput at 30 gigabits, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Because if you're doing 30 gigabits per second, you are pushing a hell of a lot of data through that box, aren't
Hmm.
you? Right? Boxes, I should say. Right. So we were £50 per terabyte. Is that right? Yeah, £50 per
Yep.
terabyte on the basic, and this is a fifth of the cost. So we're looking at about
£13.
£10. Yeah, £13 ish per terabyte.
Yeah. But
Right. Okay.
you're paying 3 times more for the build itself as well. But
To get the
throughput and
automation on
everything.
the threat intelligence
Yeah, the
and the
throughput
throughput
and the auto scaling.
and the auto scaling. Yeah. Okay.
So what can
But you could have a high throughput scenario where the £50 per terabyte doesn't make economical sense. But then again, you're only limited to 250 megabits per second, so
correct? Yeah.
it's
So
not like you can push.
this helps with those spikes. Maybe you've got a service that maybe, at Christmas there's a mass order of turkeys or something, and you have to everything's going through this firewall. You need it to like auto scale to 30 gigabytes per second, so people can order their turkeys for Christmas. Um, but for the rest of the year, it's not too bad. You're just paying for when you need it, kind of thing. You just got that base cost. What's the monthly for the standard if you work it out?
Well, it's about 700 and because a pound an hour basically, so it's about £730
Okay,
a month.
so it's about £365 per host if there's two of them. Something like
Yeah,
that.
if you were to deploy two NVAs, yeah. So you're looking at if you were to compare it just on a cost perspective. I don't know what the egress costs. I don't know about. Let's just talk about base costs. Let's talk about bandwidth, I suppose, because that
Mm.
does get a little bit more complicated on the MVA side. But you would be looking at about 365 ish pounds per month. You would have to for that. You would have to have your software license and your
Mm.
infrastructure. Plus, I think you would need to think about ASR, and I think you need to think about capacity reservations as well if it's that critical. Because if
Yeah.
you do have that type of downtime, then you've also got to think about potential networking across regions as well at that point. So there's quite a lot to think about there about making that truly resilient. If
Yeah, I
if that
mean,
makes
I
sense,
suppose you
not
got to
unless
think.
you're just happy with live failover.
Wow, I guess you've the different region side of things. You've got to consider that you'd have to just deploy Azure Firewall in the other one anyway, wouldn't you? But I guess how long does it take to spin it up and deploy your config? I expect it could be up quite quick.
Yeah, but on the other side, it's Microsoft's responsibility, isn't it, to maintain those four nines?
Yeah, from that region. But if that region goes out, if there really is a region outage,
Yeah,
you're not
yeah.
covered, are you? Either for either side, so you may have to.
No, so okay, so if we're going to go to that level, then we might have to think about two of these as well. Okay, yeah.
But but then if you think about it from MVA perspective, you might have two appliances in one region and then two appliances in the other. So you got to buy four hosts.
Yeah, but you
Would
could ASR the second region, couldn't you? Just for failover and have it off, but
Yeah,
with reservation to go.
yeah. But that's the question about the Azure firewall, isn't it? That if you had an outage, how quick would it be to spin it up? Because you got all the config and everything to deploy.
Yeah, as long as the portal works, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, or the
Yeah. Okay.
APIs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the APIs. Yeah. Yeah. Fair point. Yeah.
So yeah. Um,
Okay.
so what is it, about £730 a month for the standard plus uh, £13 per terabyte of processing. Premium is £1.42 per hour, and the processing is the same. So you're just paying for those. You're paying 41p on top of standard to get those extra features, those premium features.
Yeah. So you're paying just over £1,000 per month um, for it. Um, and the difference between standard and premium is £310 a month.
Yeah.
Spend extra £300 a month. Um, and I suppose it's probably worth. So you're going to get those extra features and functionality, but I suppose it's probably worth also just calling out that is there any reservations or discount possible here, like you can with infrastructure IaaS?
No, because I think it's because it's PaaS. It's kind of it's not something you kind of do that way, is it?
No, exactly. Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and I think when thinking about these pricing, I mean, we don't really deal with this day in day out, but I think I've seen some pricing, around like on from appliances on premise that a couple of appliances could cost you 60, 80, 100 grand, if not more, to have that you sweat for 3 years or 5 years, whatever that might be, plus a maintenance fee on top, which might be 2, 3 grand a year
Yeah. So
as
if you're
well.
coming from like an actual proper on-prem solution, I suppose even MVA and PaaS Azure Firewall is going to be an order of magnitude potentially less money.
Yeah, because you haven't got to buy the hardware up front and things like that. You can
Yeah.
just chop and change it when you need.
Yeah, and because like premium has so much capacity, I suppose you might think about reorganizing like how many firewalls you have and your topologies, right? Because you can push more through it, if that makes sense. Or you might split them up, right? You might say, oh, we could do two standards instead of a premium, because we don't need that sort of that capacity. Okay.
Yeah, depending if you need to segregate your network, you might be that your egress one, the ones that's connected to the all the traffic going out to the internet, might be premium, and then all the ones internally might be standard. If that makes sense to do, I don't think it would, but
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
and probably talking about that is actually going from standard to premium. You can do that change on the firewalls themselves. You don't have to like rebuild them or anything. You may
Can
have
you
to. I can't remember if you can do it in line. They will have to probably shut down and power up again.
right. Uh, can you go both ways?
I believe you can. I don't know if you can go down to basic. I think that's a bit. I think you probably won't be able to. I think it'll be between standard and premium. You can change.
And if I went basic to standard, do you know that?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
Um, but one other thing just to talk about is that there is a firewall, Azure Firewall Manager, and the idea of that is that if you had multiple firewalls, you're able to manage them in one place. So you configure them all, in one place. You can see all the firewall rules, things like that.
Right.
So it could be you might have firewalls in multiple regions, things like that. So instead of you having to go to each one, you go to one place, kind of thing.
Okay. And is that in Azure? Is that like a section in the Azure portal to do that?
Yeah, there's a firewall manager. I think I've seen it in Defender for Cloud.
Okay.
Um, but there is a cost to it.
Okay.
So it's per policy that you deploy. Because I'm guessing you can have a regional, like in effect, a policy across the region kind of thing. It's £81.24 per policy per region.
Per month.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well. Okay. But I
So
assume a policy could have like multiple rules in it and things like that, right?
yeah, yeah,
Is that like a set of config that goes down?
yeah. It might be that you've got, the example might be you might have dev test live.
Right. Yeah.
They've all
Okay.
pretty much got the same config you want to deploy.
Yeah.
And you use one policy rather than have
Could
to manually do it 3 times.
could you
But
use Terraform instead of that?
potentially, yeah. I was
Yeah.
just
Okay.
thinking that, or maybe
Yeah.
you only change it once in the firewall manager, and then it deploys it. But
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. Yeah, potentially you just do it via Terraform and thing. Maybe this is just the if you don't know, you don't have
Oh no,
infrastructure
no,
as
yeah,
code
yeah, yeah, oh, yeah,
capability.
yeah. It's good that there's a solution that you can just pay for, right? You don't need, like you say, a Terraform SME to come in and help you with that, do you? So
Yeah, exactly. So
okay. Anything else that you want to go over on?
no, I think we've covered quite a lot. There's obviously loads to dive into. Like I said, when you go onto the Microsoft documentation, it talks about all the different functionality and what they do and things like that, and explains them a bit more. So you can definitely dive into it and sort of start looking at seeing whether it fits, putting it up there if it's got all the capability you require and things like that. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks very much, Alan, for that. That was a really good overview. Well, as much as an overview as you can do of like quite a large product in a short period of time. So thank you ever so much for that. So next episode, I'll be sort of leading on. I'm going to be talking about load testing in Azure. So yeah, load testing your applications, mainly focused on web applications in Azure. But I'll take you through the products and solutions that Microsoft has got to offer on that. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please do consider subscribing if you'd like to listen to more sort of this content in the future. We have many topics that we'd like to cover, and your listens and support is what will continue to fuel the podcast going forward.
We also have the ability for you to give some feedback. Did you enjoy this episode? Disagree with our thoughts, or have we missed something that you think is valuable? We need to shout out about. Um, there's a link in the show notes to our site. There's a contact form where you can send us a message, or in the bottom right corner, you're able to leave us a voice message. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you. So send us some feedback.
Perfect. Cheers. Thanks very much, Alan, for your time, and thanks to everyone for listening. Catch you in the next one.
Yes, thanks for listening, everyone, and speak to you next week. Bye.